So anyway, sort of the presentation tonight, I just really want to take people through some ideas about how potentially you can get to Office 365 in a timely manner, and potentially how you might be able to leverage some of the funding that's lying around from Microsoft, and also cover off some gotchas with regards to some of the processes that Microsoft have available, and sort of give you a bit of insight into kind of what I think about it and what I like about it and what I think could improve. So that's where I'm going. Of course, this wouldn't be possible this evening without our trusty sponsors. So paying for the beer and the pizzas and obviously providing the venue. So thank you very much for that.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, cheers. Me, so Brendan's my name. I work for a company called Provoke. Also a Office 365 guy, and I truly believe that I'm an all-round nice guy. You can feel free to share your opinions later.
Sure.
Hey, so roughly, this is kind of what I want to rip through tonight. Is I want to talk about some new stuff that I was that's probably one of the things we talked about is that they've got folks that run the user group. We thought it would be interesting to feed some kind of cloud new stuff into the session each time that we do the session. Not just about the specific session, but some other stuff that we think is interesting and insightful. If other people during that kind of have some other new stuff that they want to share, then pony in, share it up. It's not just about someone standing at the front sort of telling a story. It's an idea for everybody to jump in. And then really I just want to kind of jump through sort of 365 today, a bit of a refresher, and then really talk through FastTrack and kind of share some of that content. So on my new stuff, so I kind of looked at the Azure side of things and kind of pulled down some things that I find that are new and interesting. And so these are a bunch of announcements that have sort of gone into a blended preview or into GA. So about 2 months ago, Microsoft announced machine learning as a service in Azure, and I've got a really cool, what I think is a cool picture of that. So basically, being able to grab a massive amount of data and then sort of fire up the machine learning side of Azure and just process ginormous amounts of data. And so one of the things that I'm seeing come out of Microsoft more and more with regards to Azure is, clearly Microsoft are building tools in their own business to run their own business and to run their own properties and technologies and to analyse data and such like. And then what I believe I'm seeing is that they're grabbing those tools that they've been building in their own business and they're commercialising them. And so when we look at this list up on the screen today, I believe that machine learning is something that they've been using themselves and working out how they can look at massive amounts of data and get trends out of it. Document DB is a new thing that literally came into preview probably last week. And so Document DB basically is a non-SQL database or non-relational database, and fundamentally, if you think about it, it's a bunch of files sitting on a disk in a non-relational database, and it allows you to basically store massive amounts of data and do super quick read-write in a non-relational structured way. So so you get rid of some of the limitations that you've had with a relational database and structures, and they've got a massive investment in the indexing and search side of that. One of the other kind of cool announcements that I saw come out was search as a service. And so when you think about today, a lot of the ways that we approach search in an enterprise is that we might deploy a product like SharePoint, and we might put a bunch of documents into SharePoint. But the reality of life is not everything lives in SharePoint, which is much to disgust to some people. And so for me, search as a service, I've sort of really only started digging into it, but fundamentally, you've got a bunch of information and you need to be able to index it and understand what it is, and also you need to be able to do it at scale with no limits. So the search as a service preview today, you can go sign up to it in Azure and you can get up to 10,000 documents just for free to start playing with and start indexing and get into that. So that literally, I think, in the last week turned up. Other things that I've kind of found interesting is that Microsoft, so they've got the Azure gallery, so you can log into Azure now and say, hey, I want to spin up a this, that, and the next thing. And so they've now got a gallery, and so that gallery's got a process for getting images into it. So you can go and look at that gallery. For example, I think there's a Brocade image in there for deploying a virtual Brocade appliance. There's a Riverbed load balancer image in there, and so Microsoft have got a certification program for getting in there. But one of the things that they've recently put into it is a SharePoint image, and so they've really got two kind of approaches to it. One's really a developer, so a single instance, and then there's a what they describe as a more high availability SharePoint deployment farm. The guidance is not to use it for production, should we say, but as a way to be able to get a dev test environment going in Azure in a super quick way without doing a lot of heavy lifting yourself. Then it's a pretty good template to look at. There's an MVP called Witta. He's like a massive SharePoint dude, and there's a podcast floating around about on Microsoft MS Cloud pod show. He talks about this image and talks about some of the strengths and some of the limitations of it. So if you're interested in it, have a search for Witta. And so that really comes into the Azure certified VM images. And one of the other cool things is SQL Server VMs always on. So one of the big things that I see that Azure's doing for us and businesses is it's giving us a real strong DR scenario and a pretty cost-effective DR scenario. So and allowing us to stretch our infrastructure outside our own server room or our own infrastructure and put it into someone else's cloud in a pretty seamless manner. So I kind of feel that the SQL Server always on is kind of helping us with that. It's the machine learning kind of screen grab. I thought that looked pretty. So I thought I'd share that. So I guess sort of getting a bit more into my forte of the world, some of the stuff that I've spotted in Office 365. One of the great things to come out due to much demand is Microsoft providing more guidance on what's happening in Office 365. So they've shipped up their roadmap site, which basically tells you kind of things that's launched, things that are about to launch, things that are in development. It's not, I wouldn't describe it as a 100% accurate, but the reality is it starts to give insight into what they're thinking about. And you'll go, like, I've gone through the list and I'm like, they're talking about things that are about to launch, and it's like, well, that's already live. And those sorts of things. But it's a great spot to be able to go through and just start. If you're thinking about something and you don't see it in 365, and you go to the roadmap and see where it's on the roadmap, and then it can potentially provide you with some more informed decisions moving forward. From a SharePoint Online side of things, big announcement last week is for me was sort of the simplification of storage management and also the lifting of site collections. So before, with storage management and SharePoint Online, it was a pretty tedious manual task, and you had to do a lot of it yourself, but they've simplified that and allowed you to automatically do it. And also it starts to look at basically using your used storage rather than your allocated storage. So if you go and allocate 100 meg or a gig to something or something like that, then it kind of takes you out of your storage pool. Whereas now, from my reading of it, it's actually the storage that you're using. One of the other big things is going from 10,000 to 500,000 site collections. I don't know too many folk in New Zealand that are going to be spinning up 500,000 site collections. But that 10,000 site collection was an uneasy low number for many orgs that we've talked to over time about, what happens when we hit that? And we didn't actually have the answer because it was actually I tried to test it, but I ran out of space in my trial tenant. So now with the limit being up at around 500,000, it's kind of hard to imagine hitting a site collection limit of that size. And if you did, you'd be spending a lot of money on storage due to the fact that it's kind of 100 meg per site collection. I think one of the things that illustrates, and also for me sort of proves, is a lot of the innovations that we're seeing in Office 365 today are a consequence of Microsoft running their business on Office 365. And so all the Microsoft employees sit in Office 365, SharePoint Online, and we see innovations coming through as a consequence of them needing to fix stuff so they can run their business. So, which is super cool. And one of the things that another thing that happened probably a couple of months ago is they've pulled external sharing out and made it super, far more visible. So where you're sitting in SharePoint Online and you're sharing externally with folks, before it was kind of hidden under the covers. It was just about a game of guesstimation about who you're sharing with and how you redacted sharing and those sorts of things. Now you can kind of see the sharing experience right in the admin console, which is cool. If you're a dev, if you're an Office dev, Microsoft have kind of relaunched a new site, so dev.office.com, and that's going to be their main portal for really driving developer experience and developer information for Office 365. And Microsoft have really stepped up their engagement with ISVs and communities about building more apps. And fundamentally in the last 6 months, they've built a team that really focuses on it for 5 people. So they're kind of doubling down there. Other kind of number increases, public folders, just in case you wanted more of them. You're a bad person if you do. You can now go up to 100,000. Bad person if you're using heaps of public folders. And then from what cool for me, from the ability to manage Office 365, they've made some great investments in that. So we've now got a management pack for SCOM, which is cool. And also, based on popular demand, Microsoft are now providing an API for you to be able to develop against some of those management tools. So if you're not going to use SCOM and you've got another system that you want to take alerts into, then you can code against that API. And there's a bunch of demos about firing up command prompt and querying it to see what's happening. And one of the other cool things that is recently shipped is Delve. It was originally called Oslo. And Delve, if you didn't get along to the SharePoint conference, basically Delve is a, for me, I guess the way I describe it is it's push search. So, historically when you wanted to find information in your organisation that people would work on, you might jump into SharePoint, go to search and type in Brendan Ford RFP. Now with Delve, Microsoft are shipping a couple of client experiences, and one of the client experiences, I open up the client experience, and because Nick, for example, works with me or is a colleague of mine, it will show me the content that Nick's been working on, which is similar to content that I've been working on. And so basically it pushes information to you. So if you've been doing a bunch of work on RFPs, then you're likely to see other things come through about RFPs. Delve today, from a Microsoft point of view, it's cloud first. So it's going to be surfacing information out of your Exchange mailbox. It's going to be surfacing information out of Yammer. It's going to be surfacing information out of SharePoint Online. In the future, they're talking about it being able to integrate with other things, but that's kind of a future play. And so what they're really trying to do is just give someone push information so that they can see the pulse of their organisation in one screen. So it's super cool, and I'd encourage you to jump onto the interwebs and have a search for Delve and watch some of the videos that are floating around.
You had much to play with it?
I've just seen a bunch of demos. To be honest, I don't even know if they've launched Delve as, hey, this is what's coming, but I haven't actually seen any bits that you can download. I might have seen some dates that kind of suggested it might be turning up in September, and it's just going to roll out through Office 365 tenants. And so if you're in your 365 tenant and you've logged in and you've clicked, hey, I want to be on preview, then you're probably likely to get it sooner than other folk.
That first released? Is that what you mean? The first release?
Yeah, I've heard September kind of floating around as a random date, and it'll just start turning up.
The concept sounds awesome.
Yeah, the concept is awesome, but it's kind of a bit of a catch-22 at the end of the day, because
you could get bombarded, but the same token, if you're a proactive person and either sales or a understanding of how your business is working as a manager point of view.
Yeah. And you can you can see what other folk below and above you are doing, and it takes on the organisational structure. So if you're pumping your org structure into SharePoint Online, then it's going to actually give you more meaning. I guess one of the challenges that I see today for many businesses is that because Delve is cloud first, if you're not running Exchange Online, Yammer, SharePoint Online, conceptually Link Online,
a reason to move.
Yeah, it's another driver to get people there and that sort of stuff. Hey, we've got some pizza. If people want to grab a piece of pizza and hear as we talk, then that'll work out. Feel free to jump out of your seats and do those bits and pieces, and I'll keep on nattering away as we go.
Everybody's down.
So this slide was just a sort of a super quick recap of 365 as an offering. So I kind of feel a few people get confused about what 365 is, because kind of Microsoft's pushed out this, hey, 365, it's everything. I'll kind of break it down pretty simply. So today, conceptually, if you're buying 365, depending on how you're buying it, in one purchase you can buy Office Pro Plus, which is the client that installs on your machine, and also can be a client that installs on your Mac. You can get Exchange Online, email. You can get SharePoint Online, which today also OneDrive for Business, which is kind of your My Documents place, give or take, whether we agree with that or not. You can pick up Link, which for me is the equivalent of Enterprise Skype, is my easiest way to think about it. Yammer, Enterprise Facebook, and the service called Rights Management, which is a service that allows you to encrypt content and control item level access by people and those sorts of pieces. So this, and then under the like Pro Plus, we under Office, you can buy additional add-ons like Visio, the Project Client, Project Online, and a new thing called Power BI these days. Power BI kind of sits in Excel. So it's pretty much what we know and love from Microsoft, or know, but buying it in a different way. Cool. Hey, so what I want to get into now is FastTrack. And to be super kind of crystal about my title of the presentation, getting on the FastTrack to Office 365, I guess one person could, people could interpret that as, hey, what's the easiest way to get to Office 365? Hopefully I'm going to cover a little bit of that. But the reality is Microsoft have a program called FastTrack. And I've got some links coming up later. And so really what I want to talk about today is, or tonight is, what is this program called FastTrack? And a little bit about why does it exist from Microsoft's point of view, because I've spent a bunch of time talking to them about it. And then sort of dive into a bit of detail, and then as a customer or a partner, how you can use or leverage FastTrack and what's in it for you. So the goals of FastTrack from Microsoft's point of view are pretty simple. So one thing that so Microsoft, if you go and read any of the analyst reports or Microsoft's reports, Office 365 is actually doing really well. They're selling a bunch of it, and that's for a few different reasons. But the actual adoption and deployment of 365 is not in line with the sales figures. So they're not deploying a one-for-one. There's a number of people that are buying Office 365 and not necessarily deploying, or a number of businesses. In addition to that, there's a number of businesses that are taking 9, 12 plus months to deploy Office 365. And so from a Microsoft point of view, they're like, well, we've got this cloud service. And so ideally, what you don't want is cloud shelfware. So you don't want people buying this service and not using it, because the reality is that's going to drive a certain dissatisfaction with the service. So really, FastTrack for Microsoft has been about sort of simplifying the process to 365, and it's a pretty loaded statement. It's also about providing an approach or a deployment methodology. And so the methodology, because it is something that they've shipped, is not going to be perfect for every organisation, but the reality is inside the methodology there will certainly be nuggets that each organisation can take, and there will be lessons that each organisation can take. But I guess for me, one of probably the biggest compelling aspects of FastTrack is kind of about making it simple and not overcomplicating. I personally find in IT, because I've been floating around for a while, we've got the propensity to make IT relatively complicated, because we actually think about all the things that might happen rather than all the things that are likely to happen, and we design for the might rather than the likely. So FastTrack is designed for the likely occurrences. There's certainly plenty of rocks we can throw at it where it's not perfect, but at the end of the day, for me, that's really about an opportunity for IT or for technology folk to mitigate those risks. So FastTrack, pretty simply, IT is complex, and complexity comes with cost. So the bigger you make the challenge, the more it's going to cost. And so what we've seen with a number of our customers is that they've said, cool, I want to move to Office 365, I want it to be seamless, I want it to be perfect, I don't want my users to even know we've gone. Okay, well that's actually quite a different proposition to I want to move to 365 tomorrow and I want to do it for $5. That seamless, nobody knows experience is actually complex, pretty expensive. I think people need to weigh up the cost versus the reward. So Microsoft, they fundamentally have been working on providing a deployment process that's a lot more lightweight. And their moves of recent, with them getting engaged in this deployment process rather than necessarily leaving it to partners or businesses, demonstrate that they're not necessarily satisfied with the rate of deployment that's happening. So really, their process is going to provide guidance and remote assistance. So I think for me, this is a bit of a key takeaway. Microsoft are going to be providing remote assistance. You will not have a Microsoft person turn up in your business or with you as a partner to do an Office 365 deployment in person. That's a different build. That's quite an expensive build. And also, FastTrack at the end of the day is not a silver bullet. This program will not fix all your problems. So getting to Office 365 with FastTrack, so really what I've just highlighted here is a way for us to start talking about a couple of the funding mechanisms and a couple of the structures that we can use. Microsoft have a thing called deployment planning services. I've had that for a very long time. You could use deployment planning services for Exchange, for SharePoint, for desktop. And if you're a enterprise agreement customer, so if you're more than 250 seats, you'll have these vouchers that you can use, and they can use for those deployment planning services days. And then the next thing is FastTrack, and so deploy.office.com is where you could head over and start the FastTrack journey. So really now what I want to talk about is sort of getting into that journey and what it may look like a bit more. But fundamentally, you could conceptually just jump over to FastTrack. You could, if you're 150 seats or more, bring up Microsoft and say, do it for me. Conceptually that might work, but you probably want a reasonable sized IT team that's got a bunch of patience. So, time to make a decision, so stop, review the plan, and then we get into what we're going to do. So the first cab off the rank is those deployment planning process, and so Microsoft have deployment planning services. Once again, if you're a Microsoft EA customer, conceptually you might have vouchers that will entitle you to go and find a partner to do a 3-day workshop and planning process for you, which as part of that we deliver a deployment plan. If you've bought a lot of Microsoft licensing, you might have enough to get a 10-day deployment plan. And really the goal out of this deployment planning engagement is to sit down with the customer and say, hey, could you talk us through, basically, what do you want to do? Are you moving Exchange? Are you moving SharePoint? Do you want to deal with your Office? You want to do an Office client upgrade? You want to jump onto Link, or do you want to use Yammer, or do you want to do everything? Hey, let's have a little bit of chat about your identity. How do you manage identity today? Let's have a little bit of chat about your network. What does your network look like? What does your firewall look like? Who's your ISP? How's their routing up to the data center? What's your standard profile of your users and those sorts of bits and pieces. So all that really comes into this planning engagement. Out of that you end up with a document and recommendations. You should also end up with a business case for the business to justify why it would be sensible to move to Office 365. So you do this conceptually before you've actually gone and bought Office 365 from Microsoft or signed the dotted line. Because to be honest, if you've signed the dotted line and bought it, you're kind of already on this bandwagon. Other than the fact you've just worked out a different way to license your on-prem stuff. So the deployment planning services is about working with your internal IT team or working with a partner to get your journey to the cloud planned. And if you've got planning services days, fundamentally it's free. If you haven't, you just kind of get your calculator and say, well, how much would it cost to pay someone to do something for me for 10 days or for 3 days? But from that, you should be able to take that plan to executives, to your boss, to your manager, and say, hey, this is how I think we can get there, this is what I think it's going to cost, these are the risks, blah, blah. So once you've got that deployment plan and you're thinking that Office 365 is the right way to go, today Microsoft, just want to be super clear on this because this kind of messed with my head for a while. So Microsoft have really got 2 things in play. One's called the FastTrack for Office 365. And so if you're 150 seats and above, this is part of the service. You get this no matter what as a customer. If you're an IT contractor or a partner working with a customer, you can also leverage this FastTrack onboarding process and work with someone at Microsoft to do it. If you're over 150 seats once again, and you choose to, you move into this adoption offer, which is really basically where Microsoft gives a customer a voucher, and fundamentally that they can decide to use that voucher with Microsoft, or they can decide to use that voucher with a partner. It's kind of that simple, but these are 2 separate programs. And so fundamentally you jump onto the FastTrack thing when you're doing a bit of planning, and it'll go through and it can provision a trial tenant and get some users up there and give you some content and bits and bobs, and we'll jump in to see what that looks like. And then you get into this, cool, well I've done a plan, now I need to decide how I'm actually going to make this plan come real, and that's when you may look at the adoption of it. Make sense? Ish. So this is just a little bit more detail about exactly what, from Microsoft's point of view, this offer looks like. So where I was getting confused with this FastTrack offer, because it's kind of changed a little bit, so this is the big one, does not include mail migration. Literally, you've kind of got this thing set up, you've got some people conceptually registered against it and licensed, and you've got some very generic content in there. I would suggest you probably don't have a business solution unless you're a brand new business. Or you decide that you're a greenfields business and you're going to turn Exchange on-prem, SharePoint on-prem to read-only. Then it's a very quick migration. And then you've got this deployment offer, which basically really look at it in two very simple ways. If you go with Microsoft, you can potentially get mail migration under certain conditions. If you say, cool, I'm actually going to take my voucher and go to a Microsoft partner and spend my credit with them, then you kind of get a bit more pick and mix as to how you go and spend that money. The partner is likely to say, cool, thank you, and we'll grab that money, we'll give you a statement of work, it'll probably require the customer to pony in some money as well. But it will give the customer a little bit more flexibility, whereas the Microsoft scheme is pretty regimented and for very good reasons. So let's just jump back and talk a little bit about FastTrack, that free thing that you get. So fundamentally, FastTrack's broken into two things. It's this getting started, and then the second phase is onboarding. What Microsoft are trying to do with FastTrack is really target kind of two audiences. One is the IT pro, which is your traditional engineer, that likely is going to be doing the migration and the setting up and the management, and then the other part is the end users, the people that are going to be have this solution forced on them with sometimes very little information. And so, in the getting started, they're basically spinning up a trial tenant, giving you 90 days to play with it, and they're giving you and they're pre-populating some content, which we'll jump in and have a bit of a look at. And so they're allowing customers to kind of get their hands dirty from day one. But when I think about getting your hands dirty, like one of the things that I feel people get confused about is they think hands dirty is about hands dirty on email. My opinion, and very much my opinion, there is no way to pilot an email migration with Office 365. We can probably tell you some fibs about piloting it, and the way that we tell you some fibs is we say we're going to put in this hybrid solution, and so that'll allow you to stay where you are and then have some mailboxes running in the cloud and you won't see any difference. That's not a pilot. We've literally put some new infrastructure into your infrastructure and we've changed your Active Directory schema. Pilot is turn it off and forget. That is not a turn it off and forget experience. And it actually has substantial cost to it. So pilot with regards to email is hard because to do proper email you need to change your MX record fundamentally and redirect your email somewhere else. Most people don't typically enjoy that. Okay, so let's see if we can have a look at what this might look like. Hey, boom. Actually, this will make my life a little bit easier. So I've gone ahead and I've actually created a trial tenant and a FastTrack pre-populated content. And basically what it does is it spins up a bunch of site collections inside SharePoint Online, and it pre-populates it with a whole bunch of content. It's got a bunch of content that's focused on the IT pro and enabling them to understand what's happening in 365. And it also gives you the option to populate a bunch of scenario content around HR and bits and pieces. So once you've populated this content, then we can see the Getting Started tab here. And it's got some great content in there like change management. So, what do we need to do inside our organisation to actually start getting people on the journey to Office 365. And it breaks it down into some phases. So if you're kind of a little bit new to it, or if you want a bit of a structure to start taking your business through the 365 journey, this is probably not, this is some reasonable content to go and have a look at. And so, planning and sponsorship, like at the end of the day, if you're going to make a major technology change, obviously you need to plan it and you need to get sponsorship inside the business. So it's got this change management stuff is a really good sort of starting place, rather than you going and rewriting all that content yourself. And then you can really just jump through all this content. So at the end of the day, it's kind of a pre-canned Office 365 targeted training experience. So if you've got some junior folks in your IT team that are going to potentially be part of the 365 migration, then it might be worthwhile getting them to come and have a look at this and kind of skilling up and watching this content themselves, so that when they're sitting in workshops and that sort of stuff, they're a little bit armed. And probably one of the other good things that this achieves is that it actually gets people into SharePoint Online and using it. So we'll start to break down some of the barriers about how they may feel about latency, how they may feel about accessibility, and how hard it is to log in and sign in and those sorts of bits and pieces. Because in effect, they're using the tool themselves as part of that journey. So we can certainly pilot SharePoint Online. That's definitely, we can certainly pilot Link Online. My opinion is very hard to pilot Mail. And so also when I was talking about, hey, there's these other scenarios, so if you've got end users and you want to take them through a bit of a workshop about what HR and internal comms might look like in a 365 world, then you can basically jump into these scenarios, and there's some pre-canned sites which gives them a whole bunch of teasers as to different things that they might be able to do. And so it starts to give people, they can visualise what the future might be like. And that's probably one of the hardest things, I think, with 365, is actually conveying to people about what it is and what potentially it can do for them. So, at the end of the day, this is all free content, and it takes about 5 minutes to provision your trial tenant. Depending on how busy it is, it might take a couple of hours for it to turn up.
So do you have to specifically request the FastTrack content in your tenant?
Great question, Alan. Thank you for asking. So when you go through, and so if you're going through from scratch, you can just go to deploy.office.com and just start up a brand new one and do that. If you've got an existing tenant, you can go through the process and then say add to existing tenant. And in that scenario, you basically just key in an admin account, and it'll go through and populate that. So for us, I'm actually just populating it into the provoke tenant and sort of stuff, kicked it off yesterday.
Yeah.
And so that we can actually have people in the business that go through and play with it. And it's because it's sitting as separate site collections, it can kind of be out of the way and you can control access to it. One of the challenges that I've talked to about Microsoft is this content is not evergreen. So it's not, because it's pushed straight into your tenant today, it's not getting updated. Microsoft have got a strategy moving forward where their goal is to have evergreen content in here. So as things in the service change, you've still got your FastTrack content and it's going to be refreshing in the background. And we'll just refer to that for the people that are familiar with provider hosted apps in Azure. That's provider hosted apps. So basically, you'll basically have an app running in 365 that's going to be pulling a bunch of content out of Azure. So they're building a CMS on a CMS and so forth. Let's see if we can get that one back. Slideshow from current. One moment, please, viewers.
Well, it comes with, we'll resume shortly.
Yeah. We'll just go to the hard way. We'll go to the manual way.
Shift F5 next time.
Yeah, shift, damn it. So really what I wanted to do there was just to sort of give you a bit of a flavour for what it looked like. I don't think, if we had a user experience person in the room, they may have some feedback about the structure of that site and how it looked and how pretty or not, or how functional usable it is. But at the end of the day, we can't sort of detract from, there's a bunch of content in there, and there's a whole bunch of structured learning that we can get into. When you fire up the tenant, one of the first things you get as an admin when you log in is you get this app here, which allows you to make decisions about which content you're provisioning or not. You can jump in here and kind of add a bunch of users and it'll kind of provision those sorts of things. So the goal really is to simplify the journey to 365 and really kind of put it on a plate as part of that FastTrack process to get people looking at it, get eyeballs on it, and to facilitate that workshop process as well during the deployment planning services. So when you're talking about something, you can actually jump into a tenant and say, hey, I want to show you this. And you can show them. One of the other things that's highlighted in there, I sort of started to try and track this down, and I discovered that it's not accessible to partners currently, and I need to work around the system. Is so they've got labs, and so if you've got an Azure tenant or you've got an ESDN subscription, you can go and get these labs and basically fire up these things in the subscription and start practicing your cutover migration or your dir sync, password sync, blah blah blah. So it actually gives you a way to do a bit of research as a customer or as a partner. To get a bit of a bit of a handle on what's happening. So that's pretty cool.
Do you actually have a direct link on that, or is it an automatic link on the
So when you log in, so as a partner, a Microsoft Cloud Deployment Partner, which is what you need to get to log in to do the stuff, portal.fasttrack.com. There's a bunch of links up the top. There was meant to be this lab link in the middle, but partners don't get that. I emailed one of the team today, but customers do. Today, that's how it sits today. So, so conceptually, you provision a tenant for a customer and you go find the labs. But suggestion was that was going to change. So we kind of did that getting started, and then the next part of it is the onboarding. So we've got a trial tenant. We've kind of made a decision to cut it over to paid, and then the onboarding process is this remote person from Microsoft working with you on getting the customer onboarded, which fundamentally, in the most basic sense, it's about getting DNS sorted. It's about getting users into the cloud. It's about assigning licenses. So it's about getting the customer onboarded, but for me, they're not using, because you haven't migrated any email, you haven't migrated any content, you may have described the service a little bit, but you haven't done any end user enablement, you haven't helped the help desk out, etc. So the onboarding is, you're onboarding them into a service, but there's a lot more to come after that. And that's really where, so I've got an eye test. So this is really the onboarding service. So really Microsoft talking about what they will do as part of that onboarding service. One of the interesting things is you've got a 12-month period from buying Office 365 that you have to use this onboarding process, otherwise it expires. But sort of this list here, for me, is that's something that we need to be aware of. So if you're using the onboarding process as a customer, then somehow you have to deal with those tasks up on that side panel. And the list actually gets relatively big. So talk about a little bit about onboarding work. So this is breaking it down to the different SKUs about what they're going to do. So setting up user provisioning in SharePoint, including licensing, enabling site collections, planning, man, it's just going to be a document, securing content, and it's just a document, enabling personal sites and social features, that's actually a click of a button. You've still got a lot of, there's not a lot of point in doing this unless you've actually got a plan about how people are going to use SharePoint. Otherwise, they've just got this new home drive that's just going to create chaos. You'll end up with a mess.
So when you say provide guidance with at the start of all of those,
yep.
Are they just providing a website or a document that talks about each of those bullet points, or actually doing that for you?
So the FastTrack onboarding stuff is going to be the way that Microsoft kind of pitch it to me as a partner. It's a concierge into Office 365. They're engineer level folk, and they have contact into the engineering team. So they will get you to run a number of tools, and conceptually you will send them some files, and then they'll come back and say you need to fix all of these things. Conceptually, I haven't seen them play because this stuff's still rolling out. And the things that they may send you a link to an MSDN article, they may send you but it's still going to be relatively generic. And the other side of things is, it's not unreasonable to understand that Microsoft are not going to send you a document on how to configure your firewall that they know nothing about. You know, they're not going to send you, and one of the things they talk about doing is DNS configuration, and you know, sort of me and Nick were having a joke in the office today. There's so many different domain name providers in this world that use so many different formats, and some of them are good and some of them are absolutely diabolical. And they're just going to send you the DNS configuration, say this is what it needs to be, and you'll go back to them and say, that's not what it looks like. I can't add it in that format, but this is what it needs to be. That's not what it looks like. You know. So I think it's going to be a really interesting journey for them.
So if you go with their GoDaddy, you're fine, but if you're with somebody else, to them it makes logic sense. I use Whois, and it was fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
But it was only because I had prior experience, but if you're new to it, it's like...
Man, you just sit there and smash your head against the wall with a new...
But the actual uptake of it and recognisation with Whois was like 2 minutes.
But yeah, some domain name providers are diabolical. You know, like you miss a full stop. You know, there's no guidance that you need a full stop or 2 full stops in front of something. It's painful. So this is page 1 of 3. So customer and partner responsibility. So we're doing this onboarding service. Could you please look after this? This, and now we're into the adoption. So, like, I don't think there's necessarily a super amount of. I'm going to post these slides up on the side anyway, so we can go through and do them. But fundamentally, what it is saying is that, you know, as a business or a partner deploying Office 365 for a customer or a customer's doing it themselves, you actually have a certain amount of responsibility that you need to look after. The person that is the onboarding person that is doing this is sitting in an office, supposedly somewhere in Australia, and they're doing it remotely. And also that Microsoft probably don't have the insurance levels to allow that person to remote into your infrastructure. They're not going to go into your infrastructure and configure stuff for you because there's a level of risk to that they can't control. So they're going to give you guidance on things that you need to do and ideally give you content that you need to use, but you still need to localize it to the customer and to the business. And you know, I think it would be really hard for Microsoft to give you, you know, to manage your end user communication, documentation, training and change management. They don't even know who your end users are. They don't even know what kind of culture you've got in your business. You know, there's a big difference between an office full of, a company full of office workers and a bunch of people that work on a factory floor. There's 2 very different training requirements there. So I don't think it's unreasonable, but the fact that there's 3 slides of things that you're responsible for suggests there's a bit to do.
You are, if you're going to be the partner preference, you've got to have a couple of skills, obviously.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, so that was really that's the FastTrack side of thing, which is from my point of view, you know, that's the free stuff, and that's about just getting you onto the ground so you can play the game, or you know, getting you into the ballpark. The adoption offer, which is it's a new offer. Microsoft have these offers and they run them every year. It's basically about getting you going and actually giving you some tools that can work. So super simply put, if you are a customer over 150 seats and you buy certain plans, Microsoft conceptually will migrate your email. If you choose not to have Microsoft migrate your email, fundamentally Microsoft will pay $15 a seat up to 1,000 seats, and then $5 a seat after that up to $60,000. And I believe those numbers to be US dollars. And they'll pay that to a partner to do it. Those partners have to be cloud deployment partners, so that's a program that they need to be part of to be able to access that. Those partners also, to get their money, have to achieve certain things for Microsoft. For example, they actually have to deploy some stuff, otherwise they don't get paid. So really, for a customer, they're left to decide where they want to go. Now, one super important thing to remember here is if you as a customer or a customer decides to go with the Microsoft migration side of things, they could still use a partner to be the person that Microsoft calls to do all the work. As soon as they go down the route of giving the voucher to Microsoft, the money is gone. There is no getting the money back and giving it to a partner. As soon as you click the button, that $15 a seat is gone. You can't change your mind halfway through. So thus we need to plan.
Mr. Customer, sorry, you just logged out to a Microsoft office.
But like I think, and the list of things that customers need to do is relatively, in the adoption side of things, is relatively large as well. And so if a customer goes into it thinking that, cool, this is, clickety click and I'm done, there's actually a reasonable amount of work that they need to do. And one of the things that concerns me is if the customer is not aware, they might have a broader responsibility than what they know about. And that's, but I still think the service will work for certain customers, but probably not for all
10,
customers.
15 users maybe.
Well, no, so the service is only available for 150 seats and above. There's certainly there's plenty of examples where some basic mail migrations are suitable for customers of those sites. Hey, so what's Microsoft going to provide? Any Lotus Notes customers in the room? Cool, we can ignore that. So fundamentally, they're talking about Exchange migrations, IMAP, and IMAP migrations, or Lotus Notes. And one of the things that I think if you've done any work with Office 365, this one here, all migrations will use Microsoft cloud-based migration tools. That's kind of a giveaway about what they're actually doing. So they're going to use the tools that's in Office 365 today that conceptually you could use yourself, or conceptually a partner could use. In saying that, I don't know what you'd use them yourself rather than use the offer if the offer's sitting there. Certainly, you might as well get Microsoft to do some of the legwork or use some of the money to get a partner involved. But once again, we see the customer's expectations and responsibilities. That's a short list. But it does get a little bit bigger. And there's a couple of gotchas that sit in there. And they're regular gotchas that we turn up with 365 migrations. So depending on where you kind of sit in your technology stack, they're going to take different approaches. But if you've got a bunch of public folders, with this service you've got to work out how to deal with those yourself. And there's ways to do that. And so there's basically what will not be migrated versus what. So really what we're seeing is that Microsoft are doing a pretty basic mail migration at the end of the day. In this Exchange sort of hybrid migration scenario, but I think that not migrated list is pretty small. The amount of work, remembering that this will also be done remotely. So if you're a customer not engaging a partner to do this, you will be expected to set up Exchange in a hybrid mode. So you will be expected to run the hybrid wizard yourself. You will be expected to address those issues yourself. Certainly you will have a Microsoft person on the end of the phone to assist you through that process, but fundamentally you'll be doing the clickety-click and you'll be going back to them. So once again, it's about saying, hey, my IT team in the business, do they have time to do that? Do they have the experience to do that? Have they done it before? And the answer could be yes. But the reality is you're going to be the person on the coalface doing the stuff. Notes. I'm a pretty basic guy. And I've been thinking about this FastTrack program and the adoption offer, and I think it's actually not a bad deal for customers and for partners. I reckon if there's a customer that's got an enterprise agreement and they've got some deployment days, then I think they'd just about be crazy not to go and use some deployment days to get a partner in to do a deployment plan. Even if they don't have deployment days, I think it would be sensible to get someone that's done it before in to help them with a plan and just do that, conceptually even that 3-day workshop concept where they get a deployment plan. And then if they're able to access the deployment planning, the FastTrack adoption stuff for that $15 a seat, like I think probably the simplest way you could do it is say, I'm going to move my identity to the cloud, so I'm going to choose to do some password sync. And I'm actually going to deploy one of the most basic workloads. I'm going to deploy Link online. And so my justification for this approach is, so a customer will get ROI, they'll get value, the business will get value out of Office 365 super quickly. Users will actually get used to logging into 365 and they'll get used to going to a place so that they can use Link. A lot of organisations that I've talked to that had no interest in Link, started using Link, were actually super impressed with what it did for their business around chat amongst their staff, around video calling, around desktop sharing and those sorts of bits and pieces. Even relatively small organisations, 100 odd people. Link actually it lights up a bunch of different things. And also if you're to do this, you can do click to run Office Pro and stream that down. So if you're distributed org, it's an easy way to do an Office upgrade. And if you're super keen, you can do OneDrive for Business, but we won't talk about that too much. And so for me, if you're a customer and you've got access to this funding, you can go and take that funding and you can get a partner to help you get to this basic level where you're authenticating against the cloud, you've got an identity in the cloud, you're getting some value out of Office 365 because you're using OneDrive for Business, or you're using Link, or you're using Office Pro Plus. And through that process, you'll actually iron out some of your infrastructure complexities. And then you start planning your mail migration. Historically, I always kind of turned up and said, do mail first because it's commodity and the easiest. But the reality is it's probably something that freaks people out the most because businesses run on email. Businesses today don't necessarily run on Link. I know Provoke does now that we've been using it for years. But it's a simple way to get your feet wet and start using it, and it gives you a bit of an ear gap to get onto the mail side of the experience. This sort of thing here could be done in a week or two. It's not a big job, and that's elapsed time. It's not a big job. Mail migration requires a little bit more thought, even if you are using third-party tools. So that, for me, that's kind of my, you don't need to boil the ocean. Office 365 is not about moving everything in one day. It's about picking off the pieces of the pie to actually demonstrate success and value back to the business. And that's probably for me one of the core tenets of kind of the approach that Microsoft are pushing with FastTrack is get a win early, get active early, and start seeing some value out of it rather than just having something that sits on the shelf. So that's my little diatribe. Any questions, queries, quandaries?